Welcome to Real Estate Insider. In this video, I'm talking with Realtor Mike Urban in Boston, Massachusetts. Mike is part of a network with EXP, and he has a partner that he works with in the state of Pennsylvania. And together they have about 71 agents currently, and he shares some very valuable insight as to where he thinks the market is headed, a little bit about his Boston market, and gives some invaluable advice to anyone in the industry that's considering either getting out or getting into the career of selling real estate. I hope you like the show. Mike, I'm super excited to talk to you today. Tell everybody who you are and what you do.
So my name is Mike Urban. I'm a real estate agent here in Boston, Massachusetts. Been doing this for over 7 years now. And that's pretty much it. Before I got into real estate, I was an electrical contractor, so transitioned into this pretty easily.
So are you a team leader? Do you have a team in Boston?
So I have a pseudo team. It's me. I have a transaction coordinator, and then I have a few agents that handle either buyer agents or rentals for me, any kind of landlord rep or even tenant rep we do. I don't handle it personally. And then I also have a business in Pennsylvania as well. Pretty much the same thing. We have about 71 agents between Pennsylvania and Massachusetts.
You say we, you mean your brokerage or under you?
Under me. Yeah, under me. I have a partner. His name is Danny Lorenzini. He also has a real estate school in Pennsylvania as well. And both me and him operate. He operates in Pennsylvania. I operate here in Boston. And but we work for EXP Realty. And we have an organization called the Launchpad that we've been building for the last 1.5 to 2 years.
That's amazing, man. 7 years in the business and 70 agents. That's crazy. So what did you guys, this Launchpad, is it like a corporation? Is it an LLC?
So we're basically an organization underneath the EXP Realty umbrella. And what we do is it's actually, we've onboarded 70 some agents in only the last 1.5 years, believe it or not. And basically what we do is we either take agents that are either going through the school, we get a lot of recommendations from the school and we get them licensed and then they come to work with us or they go work wherever. And alternatively, we have agents that are coming over from other brokerages as well, both in Massachusetts and in Pennsylvania. We even have some, believe it or not, we have an agent down in Florida. We have an agent in the Midwest somewhere too. But ultimately, we help them get started in the business. I'm here for masterminds and coaching. So is Danny. And then we have some partners as well that also contribute to that coaching. And they have different things available to them if they decide to join with us.
You're quite the entrepreneur. So you and your partner, you kind of split things down the middle. Is that the way it works? You get a percentage of the sales and then it kind of comes down to you guys and you take salaries and split the rest, or how does it work?
So basically the way it's working is we're still independent. We're all independent contractors. Everybody has the eligibility to do what they want. This is how it works at companies like EXP Realty. Even Keller Williams has, their profit share models. We have a revenue share model here at EXP. And the reality is, we get a percentage of every single sale that closes based on the agents, and that gets split evenly between everybody that's up the chain, essentially.
Gotcha. Exciting. So how's business?
Business is good. Obviously, interest rates are high, so it did slow down. Although, last few months we had some of our best months, believe it or not. But I think that given the condition of the market, the uncertainty of the market, things obviously, they slow down naturally in Q4 and Q1. You know that. But on top of that, I think the uncertainty from the Fed, interest rates, and again, job market has a lot to do with it. So we're doing what we can do in order to stay in touch with our past clients and stuff like that and trying to nurture those people to try to generate more business. But it's not as easy as it was a year ago, right? I think that holds true for everybody around the country.
Yeah, well, you've been in the business for 7 years. You don't remember what it was like in the 2008 downturn. It got pretty crazy, man. I think we Everyone's hoping that it's not going to be as bad as '08. But I think there's a lot of things right now that's challenging our industry. It's not just the high interest rates. I think real estate in general, the profession, is actually being challenged in a lot of different ways. As we know, we have a couple big lawsuits, class action lawsuits that are out there with NAR. You mentioned Keller Williams; they're one of the defendants, as well as Home Services Over America. We've seen where a couple of these agencies, mega real estate companies, have already sort of like settled out. Remax settled out. Anywhere real estate company that owns a huge conglomerate, including Coldwell Banker and Century 21. I mean, big brands, many others too. They settled out as well. And a lot of it is coming down to, a commissions-based conversation, right? Like how agents get paid. And a lot of people might believe that real estate agents have been part of the problem. You mentioned the last couple of years, or you said last year was pretty good. The last 3 years have been like great. You get your real estate license, man, everything you touch turns to gold. Are you following what's happening? I mean, you guys are ramping up, building a big team, things like that. I mean, is your head wrapped around this stuff? I mean, what do you think about all these lawsuits going on?
Honestly, I mean, I don't give that much power to it. Like, I understand, I'm mindful of it, okay? But to be honest with you, I don't try to focus a lot of my attention on it. I know what's happening. I know that there's lawsuits. I know that, sellers don't want to pay a buyer agent commission because essentially they're paying for a buyer agent to negotiate against them and paying them for it, right? Like, you could look at it that way if you want to. But the reality is I try to stay positive, and I think that, there's a silver lining in everything. And we're just trying to figure out ways in order to pivot or to shift and kind of be, if you could be positive about it. We're trying to figure out ways to make it happen if this does go through and let's say sellers are no longer paying a commission, and it's going to be a difficult shift. But I feel like the more weight we give to it, the harder it is on the agents, so it's staying productive and doing things like that kind of helps shift people's mindsets away from it, not to say that they shouldn't be mindful of it.
The nice thing about videos like this is that they're time stamped. So depending on when someone may be watching this video, a lot of changes may already have come to pass. But for the time of this recording, you're in Boston, Massachusetts, as well as, Pennsylvania in your two main territories. And somewhere right nestled in there is the state of New York. And I'm sure you've heard as of January 1, New York will forbid. Actually, I take that back. They made it, I think, effective immediately, but they are forbidding sellers from paying a buyer's agent commission. And, as traditionally it's worked nationwide, and really NAR was the sort of the one that introduced this, was that, the listing broker will get the commission from the seller, and they will cooperate or fee share to the buyer's broker. Now New York is saying, nope, we're not going to let that happen anymore. We're going to allow the actual buyer's broker and the actual seller, negotiate on how much the buyer broker gets paid. What do you think of this?
I'll tell you what, just hearing what you said, I've read it before, but just hearing what you said just really puts it into reality. I think that no matter what you do, and I'm not trying to dodge the question, but I think no matter what you do, there's going to be somebody that's upset, right? To some capacity, right? You can't have it both ways. It's really hard to have it both ways. But I think essentially if the seller is paying, this comes down to this again, where the seller is paying you to negotiate against them, essentially, right? And I think that that's going to become part of the negotiation on the buyer's behalf on the sale price of the property itself, especially if we start entering into a declining market and it becomes more of a buyer's market. It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, I don't necessarily agree or disagree with any of it. I hope that we could all come to a level playing field. to some capacity. But again, you could shift this any way you want possible, and somebody somewhere is going to get upset no matter what way the pendulum swings, in my opinion, whether it be the buyer's agent, or the seller, or the seller's agent. It's just how it's going to be.
I know it's like ask or watch what you wish for kind of thing, right? You get
Correct.
these lawsuits and these attorneys that are going into it, and it's like, does it really benefit or does it actually hurt the buyer and seller with these regulations that, come from lawsuits?
Correct.
A question that I have for you, because I've been in the industry for a long time, in the housing market, one aspect or another, since 1989. So that's a long time. Mike, I probably predates, I don't know, when were you born?
85.
Okay, 85.
So close.
you were crawling around, right, and running around when I got into the housing industry. But anyway, through the years, brokerages, real estate coaches have been saying that in order to survive as a real estate agent, grow a sustainable business and survive, there's a term that says you must list to last. I'm sure you've heard it before, right? It's like, kind of the golden rule. Ye who owns the gold makes the rule. Now, a listing broker doesn't own the gold or own the real estate so much when they're the listing agent, but they kind of do have a fair amount of control if they're an exclusive agency for that seller, right? That there can't be another agency involved for a contracted period of time. So in a sense, the listing broker sort of does control the gold if they can get that seller to list, and depending on what their cancellation terms are and stuff like that. Do you think if we get into an environment where these plaintiffs are successful and they adopt this federal law, or that a lot of states adopt the position to where they don't want the listing broker to be the one that determines what the buyer broker gets paid, like it is now in most cases? Maybe the seller doesn't want the listing broker to control any longer, the process of the sale. Maybe they don't want the buyer broker to shop based on what they get paid so much. Maybe they just want to negotiate it together, if you will. Do you think that puts the buyer's broker in a more favorable light than the listing broker when it comes to getting paid? Or do you still think it will pay to more, or be the ideal survival tactic to list to last?
It's a good question. I mean, the reality is a lot of buyers also are sellers, right? So it's hard to determine what's going to be the path of least resistance in order for either party to get paid at this point. I think, like I said, it could go either way. I think that buyer's agents are going to have, especially new buyer's agents, are going to have some trouble in states and in areas that do adopt this, where there is, let's say, there is no seller or buyer agent compensation, because a lot of buyers can't afford to pay a buyer's agent. It's just the reality of it. And, a good example of that, maybe not necessarily here in Boston, but in Pennsylvania, I mean, people are just scraping by. Okay. Like, they're literally just scraping by. They're doing 3.5% down, FHA, VA, some areas, PHFA, and they're just making it. So how are those agents going to all of a sudden ask for a commission to be paid to them to, take them around, do all these things, and then they could barely afford the house that they're getting into? That's the hard reality. I think this what's going on, I don't agree with it. I really don't agree with it. I also could understand and respect the interworkings of why it's going on, but as a greater whole, the greater sum of things, I don't know if it's going to be more beneficial than it is right now.
Yeah. I mean, there's pros and cons to both being a listing agent and a buyer's agent, right? And I mean, but I hear you. I mean, I think if push came to shove and the buyers had to pay their own representation, it would probably be the end of buyer representation, because, and I agree, I mean, just what you said. And I think the other thing is this: the mortgage industry is kind of standing back looking at all of this too. And, because their success, most of their success has been from buyer's agents, right? If we're not talking about refinance, we're talking about buyer's agents, their relationships, being able to get their clients qualified to buy the house. And, it's so the loan officers have been sort of, courting, if you will, the agents to get those leads. So the mortgage companies are stepping forward and they're making bold, brazen statements like this. Well, if that's the case, we'll take care of those buyers. We'll just find a way to finance the commissions over the next 30 years for these buyers. So, they could pay 3 or 4 times the actual commission rate and build it into their mortgage. But, I don't know, Mike. I think, honestly, when I look at it, I do get it too, right? I mean, we've had buyer's agents that have literally done nothing except write a contract in the heat of the market. The buyers found their own property on Zillow or something like Zillow. They went to the open house on their own, and a lot of times standing room only, parked a quarter mile away and walked to the open house that was packed. And they basically called their agent up and said, I want it. And their agent said, okay, well, great. So how much over the list price do you want to offer? How much cash down do you have over appraised value? Are you willing to forego your home inspection? So some people sit around and look at it and go, well, what the heck was the real estate agent for anyway? Why do I even need a buyer's agent? I could have just went to the listing agent and gave them the deal and got just the same deal probably, right? But I think that's going to change. But I think, Mike, that the sellers are going to find that the buyer's agent may be more valuable than they think their listing agent is. I think the table may turn and they might say, you know what, I can get anybody to come in here and do a 3D tour. I've got all these companies marketing to me now for X amount of dollars. They'll take professional photography. I can access the MLS now. It's interesting, Bright MLS. Now, Mike, even our own MLS, and I think they're partnering with other MLSs around the country to, they've launched this site called Nestfully, which basically gives the buyers and sellers that wish to research the power that the agents have, right? They can have the back end analytics, be able to come up with their own comparables, see market trends now on their own, and a lot of data that, really Zillow or, Trulia or other sites like them weren't providing. But the big thing is now they can see what the buyer agent commission is as of now, right? But anyway, when we're looking at all of this, I think this is really going to change the shift from, it may be more important to be a buyer's agent.
I think that, as you said, I think that sellers have, I think it could go both ways. I think that sellers do have access to a lot of data now, as do potential buyers. But the reality is how they interpret that data and how they use that data. It's just like anything else. You could go to the Lowe's or Home Depot and buy a can of paint and paint your own house and paint the exterior of your house. It doesn't mean that they're going to do it. I think, of course, there will be some people that want to do that, right? But it's going to be a tough call, to be honest with you. I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen, but I think that it's going to hurt more than help a lot of the sellers, because the reality is you could list your house, and if there's no compensation to or a buyer can't afford a buyer's agent, they're eliminating buyers, right? And the market's going to shift. Like we just talked about before, the market was going to shift from more of a seller's market, even if it becomes more of a balanced market. The harder it is to sell a house, I think the less relevant this lawsuit actually is, right? If it becomes a buyer's market and all of a sudden, there's more competition on the buyer side, there's a lot of listings, it's harder to sell your home. I don't know. I think they're playing with fire, to be honest with you. I really do. I think they're playing with fire. And I think, as we said before, it's like being in a lawsuit once it comes to discovery, right? Like all of this stuff comes comes up out of the woodwork. And I think that's going to be true for this as well. It's really going to be interesting to see where it heads either way. But I think that most agents still need to focus on, as you said before, list to last. A lot of agents need to still focus on listings. I think they need to be collecting buyers, and they need to be nurturing their buyers in their database. And they just need to be positive about it. No matter what way it goes, it's going to affect everybody. It's going to affect everybody. But I think certain states and certain areas are going to be more affected than others, especially in states where buyers don't have a lot of cash. They aren't able to save a lot of money. They're not able to afford a buyer agent. So is that automatically going to limit that buyer from, buying the house on 123 Main Street? Maybe that buyer was going to be the second offer to bid up the price on that house. Now, all of a sudden, they're not buying the house because they can't afford a buyer agent. It's very interesting. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, and I don't know if this is true where you're at, but here in Massachusetts, especially Eastern Mass around Boston, it is very taboo for a seller to represent, or a seller's agent to represent both a buyer and seller in the same transaction. It very rarely happens. So there are states out there where, to try to change that dynamic for the consumer, that, hey, here it's this person's listing my house, this is who represents me, that you're not going to represent a buyer. Like it's laid out clearly in most contracts. I would say 99% of contracts I sign are with me just representing the seller, and I'm okay with that, right? I'm okay with that. But it's going to be interesting.
Mike, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because when people are complaining about real estate agents, and on my our channel, our Sachs Realty channel, I get a lot of comments that they're just blaming us, period, across the board. A lot of people are just angry. But I think a lot of those are in states where the agent had the dual agency, where they had both the buyer and the seller, and they tried to teeter-totter that fine tightrope, how do you do that? And I've always said that you can't. Right. I've always said that. Maryland, I can be a dual agent as a broker only. Right. I have to have an assigned agent for the buyer and assigned agent for the seller. But in neighboring Virginia, they're allowed to, an agent can be a dual agent. But I don't think it should be permitted. I think it should be outlawed completely, because it's, there's all kinds of motivation for the agent to pretty much, say whatever, do whatever in order to get both sides of the transaction. And I'm not saying that agents are deliberately, untruthful, but I think we're leaning on human nature a little bit. And when somebody needs money and they're in a situation and they know that they can double end it legally, they may push others out for the purpose, or tip off the ones involved with them so that they're successful, where someone else, where that would require that agent making less money. It just incentivizes the potential bad behavior. I'll say that. Mike, you got out of construction contracting, and I know you were in the electrical field. I want you to talk a little bit about that. Because that's a great business to be in. I mean, a lot of people we talk, you and I have talked about, universities and being a lot of money, and people need to learn skills and trades and things like that. You had that under your belt, and you decided to get into real estate. Can you kind of tell everybody, what were you doing 7 years ago before you got into real estate?
Yeah, so almost right out of high school, my dad had an electrical contracting business, and I pretty much seamlessly transitioned right out of high school. I didn't really plan on going to college. I went to college for a very short amount of time, didn't work out. And I wanted to make money, I wanted to make a living for myself and do all of those things. So my dad had his own business for probably around 25 years at the time. And I started small with him when we did residential, commercial, and industrial electrical work. But, I've always been pretty independent and independent thinker. I always try to do stuff on my own. And I knew there would come a time where I would want to transition into something else. And by the point of time that I was at, I decided that the path of least resistance, I already know homes, right? Like we've built new homes, lots of renovation, X, Y, and Z. I knew that the path of least resistance would be to do something involving homes or do something involving real estate in general, because I already had this vast amount of knowledge. I've been through probably 10 times the amount of homes as any agent in the market because of sometimes we would be in 5 houses in one day, right? So that was a path of least resistance for me. And I actually took the real estate exam, and I was buying a house around the time, and I put it off on the sideline. I'm like, you know what, this isn't for me. I failed the test, not miserably or anything like that. Put it off. Some life events happened. I ended up taking the test again. I passed. And, within the first 6 months, I was like top 50 in the board of realtors at where I was at in Pennsylvania. And I'm like, Jesus, I mean, if that's the case, what could I do in a full year? What could I do 2 or 3 years from now? And things progressed, and that's just kind of how it went. But I will tell you, you had mentioned, being through the 07, 08 market crash. One thing that was a determining factor for me, to some capacity, was I was an electrician at that time. And I remember prior to that, there was so much going on, building renovations. You couldn't drive down a street without seeing a dumpster, somebody putting in a new kitchen, a new bathroom. And I remember driving around with my dad and just like, I mean, we always had work, right? But we didn't have like weeks upon weeks of work stacked up. And I remember looking around, and nobody was doing anything. We go to the supply houses, nobody would be there. Nobody was, there was no renovation projects going on. So I saw it from that end, right? I saw what happened from that end. I didn't see it from the sales end per se, but I saw it from that end. And
so you're talking about
anything else,
before and after. So before the crash,
correct.
You saw all these dumpsters and construction, and then you saw what happened as a result of a downturn and the complete halt to construction.
Correct.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yep. So I was part of that. I was part of that aspect of it. And I always thought to myself, like, in electrical or with a blue collar job like that, it's hard to scale businesses because you need employees and stuff. Where real estate, you could get away with a lot just being an agent, maybe having an admin and a transaction coordinator. So that was always also in the back of my mind as well. If there was ever kind of a shift like we had, or a market crash like we had before, and then all of a sudden all the contractors are out of work because, nothing is going on. Everything is the way that it is.
Well, you're right. I mean, that's a good point. And for anybody listening, I mean, real estate affords you the ability, if you can make it, and stick with it long enough, it affords you the ability to scale a pretty decent sized business with without a lot of overhead. And, as
Correct.
a builder, you and I we share a lot of the same, backgrounds. Because I mean, I was a contractor. I started out of high school. I mean, I went to college. I started when I was in high school and, doing labor jobs. And, I went to college for a semester and a half, and it wasn't for me. Back then it was a little different. It wasn't the pressure to have a college education as it is today. I don't even think you could be a job superintendent nowadays without some type of college degree. But when you know the trade, it's kind of, it definitely puts you in a different position. But when if you know how to do the pulling the wires in the house, or putting in the heating and air system, or framing up the house, or putting the roof on and things like that. But the expense of scaling that type of business with buying trucks and having employees and tools and things like that really makes a downturn potentially catastrophic, right? I mean, I know a lot of companies, contractors that went out of business. What advice do you have, telling, moving forward and knowing your experience now, if someone's listening to this and they're saying, man, there's a lot of changes in the real estate industry, I'm wondering whether I should just get out because I'm not making it, or I'm wondering whether I should get my license. How would you advise people now? What kind of commitment does it take, and what things should they be doing that you do on a day-to-day business to be successful?
So let's start with the question if it's a good idea to get into it or not. I think that no matter what, anybody could be successful no matter what they do. If you were to mow lawns, up and down your road and start small and just stay doing that, you could grow that into something, right? So I think that anybody getting into the business could be successful if they decide to treat it as a business. But unfortunately, and I'm not going to segue into this, but a lot of agents don't, right? They don't treat it like a business. They treat it like something that they're doing on the side, and they wonder, why am I not busy? Or why is this person busy and I'm not busy? They start comparing themselves to other people. The reality is, no matter what happens with the market, no matter what happens with the commission structures and who's paying this or who's paying that, closings are still going to happen every day. The people need to live somewhere, right? They need to live somewhere, and somebody needs to get them from point A to point B. If that, or if we get eliminated, that's a different story, but we're not even on that. We're not even there yet, right? So I think it's a good idea to get in if you want to own your own business and you want to maybe not necessarily have your own hours, because your clients essentially determine your hours. But if you're consistent and you have a plan, you will do well. You can't go to the grocery. It's like going to the grocery store and not having a list of groceries and you're walking around aimlessly, right? You're trying to find what you need, what you want to get, X, Y, and Z. If you go in there with a plan, you're in and out of the grocery store. It's the same thing with business. If you have a plan and you enter that business with a plan, you could potentially be successful if you have habits and you maintain the same level of excitement that you had when you were getting your license, right? Yeah. So that's my answer in terms of getting into the business. As for people that are already in the business, again, I would say, be committed to what you're doing. Okay. Figure out a game plan. What are you doing, daily actions, in order to try to get business or try to close business? You need to be consistent with these things. You have to have a system in place, and you need to work that system. There's systems from everybody out there that you could follow and copy, but everybody thinks they know what the next best thing is, and then they start changing things and X, Y, and Z. My question is, have you earned the right to change somebody else's method of getting business? You don't, period. You don't. Don't be creative. Stick to what works and be consistent with what works. Then once you have achieved success with what works, then you could build on your own thing. All right. Don't chase things, shiny objects, stuff like that. Everything works, but you need to have a foundation and pillars of your business in order to be successful. That's pretty much how it goes for the agent that's, already in the business. Just be consistent. As for, what was the last question? My daily practices?
Yeah, like what do you do every day? What are your habits? What are these systems?
Sure. So I use something called an Eisenhower matrix in order to figure out my day. It's basically what I'm going to do, what I'm going to schedule, what I'm going to delegate, and what I'm not going to do. That helps me build on a foundation of, if I have a massive task list, what am I going to accomplish first? And I usually do something that's called eating the frog. I'm sure you're probably familiar with it. I try to do the hardest tasks first. Sometimes the hardest tasks are filming for YouTube. Sometimes the hardest tasks are making that phone call for the inspection report and they want, the house torn down or whatever. I try to do the hardest things first to make the rest of my day pretty easy. A lot of suggestions that I have for a new agent is, if you don't have deals pending, you don't have this going on, figure out a system in order to generate business. And you could do that for free. I mean, I sold $4 million worth of real estate with basically no tools and a pen and a paper, and I made more money in that 6 months of selling real estate. It wasn't even 6 months of selling real estate than I did an entire year of doing electrical work. Figure out a plan. What are you going to do? What are you waking up to do? Figure out your morning the night before if you have to, and be how could I say? Be consistent. That's the key. You have to be consistent and don't go off the sidetrack. If you want to do open houses and you want to do X, Y, and Z, do them every day. Do them every weekend. Do it for 6 months and see if you have success. Don't just do one thing and then turn it off. You have to be consistent.
Man, there's a lot of power in that, man. That is that's some great advice. And you said something I just want to touch on, and so true. Do the hardest things first. I mean, Mike, we all want to do what makes us, like what we do, right? I mean, we want to do the easy part first, but if we don't do the hard part, we realize that we can't do the easy part because we don't have a business, right? I mean,
Correct.
We basically will, through, doing the easy things first, put ourselves out of a job. And it's so true, man. I love that. And well, we appreciate it. I mean, any final parting words of advice?
I would just say that if something seems hard and, things aren't going your way or whatever, it's an opportunity. Okay. It's an opportunity for you to grow. It's an opportunity for you to do something better. And it's an opportunity for you to get better. So when things get hard, or if there's a hard inspection report, you could ask my agents. I'm like, that's good, because it gives me an opportunity to learn, or it gives me an opportunity to reach out to somebody that I've never had to reach out to before and learn something, right? So you create your problems as an opportunity to take with you as ammunition, or like a cookie jar for future transactions, or for future business, or for future whatever. So that's what I would say. Be consistent. Treat every opportunity, whether good or bad, as an opportunity itself, and make yourself better. You're not going to get better if it is not hard. If everything was easy, everybody would do it. But the people that come out on the other end are the ones that made those hard choices, took the hard things to do, and they made something of it. Okay?
All right, man. Thanks so much.
No problem. Thanks for having me, guys.
Talk to you soon.
Yep.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed meeting Mike. And if you did, you can let us both know by smashing that thumbs up. As you can probably tell, this is a brand new channel. So if you'd like to get more information or know when we post, you can hit the subscribe and hit the alert bell, and you'll know every time we upload content just like this. And if you don't know who I am, I'm Todd Sachs. I'm a real estate broker here in Maryland, and I have a company called Sachs Realty. You can check out our channel here for more information. See you next time.